Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I am Mario here once again, and once again, I am seriously sweating a lot, mainly because of the fact that this place is way too hot. Like, even way more hotter than ever before. But I digress. So anyways, welcome back to more Let's Play of Super Mario Odyssey. In this case, in Super Luigi, well, I would say Super Wario Odyssey, if you couldn't tell for this costume. But ultimately, though, we don't have the pink nose or anything like that, or even in this case, the actual zigzag mustache design. But even then, though, this is still Super Mario Odyssey after all, because even then, yeah, everything else to be expected. So, yeah, last time we have managed to deal with Luigi's Blue World in specifically Seaside Kingdom, and we actually did a pretty much a better run than the forms of how it does it on the Snow Kingdom for sure. And today for this episode is the fact that we are about to begin the Luncheon Kingdom by going through Luigi's Blue World. So even then, let's get this thing to it by going through Hide It mode first off, and then after we're done with that, then we can do the Find It mode throughout the majority of everything. So even then, yeah, today stays the forms of the 12th of December, in this case for tonight, in this case by the forms of, I would say, North America or something like that, and probably during the forms of the midnight on the UK time, about the fact that the Game Awards is about to be hosting for the likes of tonight. So even then, I'm really looking forward to able to see how that turns out. But unfortunately though, I don't think I can able to mention about that specific details about this, because obviously because of how the fact that I'm usually in the middle of something with other playing games and all that stuff. So even then, I have no idea why I'm truly saying that right, because of to be more specifically, because there's not much else to talk about. Apart from, you know, as I mentioned this before already, because of how the fact that there was actually the ND World presentation that's been happened during the forms of 2 days ago. And I think I should probably start mentioning about that now, because I think yesterday I've already mentioned about, you know, the state of play announcements and all that stuff. That one's actually pretty good, but not as like amazing, or in this case hyped for when it comes to the forms of in comparison to the forms of the Nintendo Directs and all that stuff, because, you know, with the forms of Nintendo Directs, I'm basically hyped for everything. But at the moment right now is the fact that in my overall experience of the forms of the E3, or, well, usually for E3 stuff, I'm usually super hyped about. But when it comes to likely regular Nintendo Directs, well, I'm usually pretty excited for most other things back in the past, such as, of course, the sequel to Super Mario Maker, as well as the remake of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, and also at the same time, and I sometimes manage to die right there because I have no idea what I'm doing, but hopefully though we'll try that again. I know it's definitely around in that specific cliffside or somewhere, but even then I will start again. So, and then strangely enough though is the fact that this might actually be the only year about the fact that the new Mario Party has been skipped over during the forms of the modern debuts, because they already seem to have, you know, every single Mario Party's released during the forms of in every single year. But I'm pretty sure 2019 is the only exception so far, so I don't know if they're actually going to be bringing to ourselves another new Mario Party next year. You know, kind of like how it did in the forms of how it does it in the, well, specifically the N64 installments. Well, to be more specifically, when it comes to the forms of the actual, the original Mario Party that came out in 1998, originally in Japan, but then a year later in everywhere else. I think it's pretty obvious because they need to able to actually redub some of the voice clips for both Wario and Luigi, because in the Japanese version they both say, "Oh my god," because that's the part of the Japanese version, because compared to the English version, well, Luigi goes like, "Oh, whoa, 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 whoa," and then Wario just goes like, "Though I missed," as the forms of the Germany accent. So even then, just to make sure about the fact that most of these kids doesn't seem to curse or anything like that. So I'm not exactly sure if this is true or not, but even then I haven't really looked upon it that much in terms of the forms of some of the differences anyway. So, but I digress. So I think that could be also the same applies for Mario Kart 64 as well, but that'll be for another topic until whenever we get to the actual Let's Play of Mario Kart 64, hopefully during the forms of next year at some point. So, at least despite with the forms of the actual copper system or anything like that. But then again, I'm just a little bit nitpicking at this point where it comes to the forms of the combo system as far as I'm aware. But I digress. So, let's get into the forms of the actual discussion about the actual several new announcements when it comes to ND World. Is that, obviously they bring it up some more ND games during the forms of the main focus is Nintendo Switch, because, well, it's pretty obvious at this point, because at the moment right now, I don't really know if the 3DS is still continuing for that support, but even then, we'll find that out during the forms of it next year at some point. So anyways, the first game they actually did announce with in the forms of ND World is actually a sequel to the forms of, you know, the game called Golf Story, where basically you have to go around in the forms of the actual open world kind of top-down perspective where you're able to simply play golf most of your time. But it turns out during the forms of the actual ND World, well, which is the most recent one, they actually announced a sequel to the forms of the Golf Story, but except this time it usually calls it Sports Story, which I think is like a combination of any single sport, including golf, essentially, which I was assuming that's what that is, and also there is baseball, tennis, football, and also hockey, and probably, I can't remember what tribe usually gets on top of my head, because I know I haven't really looked upon that much in terms of the actual ND stuff as far as I'm aware, but the actual release date for it will about to be coming out at some point in the middle portion in 2020, so might be a perfect opportunity actually, because you know how Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games will be on its way during the forms of in Japan, so even then I'm really still super hyped about that. Well, in terms of the actual Olympics itself, so, and the next game they actually did announce is the forms of the actual another look of the forms of the highly anticipated games for the Sega fans out there, well, generally speaking of such, and that appears to be the sequel to Streets of Rage, which is none other than Streets of Rage 4, which has been hyped for about, well, 15... I think it's like 25 years ago, actually, because the third entry has been out for about, you know, 25 years old, so even then, well, in terms for the Mega Drive version to be exact, so even then, there's a nice little, things to noticing that, and I think the actual release date for it will about to be coming out for Streets of Rage 4, it'll be pretty much the first half of 2020, or to be more accurate, 2020, just like how it did in the forms of how it does it in Sports Story. So even then, aside from that, the next thing they actually did announce is Grimlight, which I don't know about that game, but apparently it's like a 2D platformer kind of like hack and slash kind of gameplay. Well, I don't know exactly how I'd really like to call it that, because then again, I haven't really watched that much in terms of ND stuff as far as I'm aware, because, well, at this point in time is the fact that they always have a lot of emphasis on ND showcases throughout in the entire year, compared to the forms of how it does it on the previous years for sure, because I understand because of how the fact that the Switch itself is doing super well in comparison to the forms of the Nintendo Wii U at this rate, but it's just that I just wish I just need to see something more Nintendo related, like, obviously we've already got Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition coming out next year, which I'm actually really looking forward to that, because I'm pretty sure I'll give that game a second chance, and hopefully I can able to play on the go, rather than just able to actually stuck with the forms of, let's just say, well, with the new 3DS version, because, well, I played it for a little bit on the new 3DS version, but I gave up in the end, just because of how the fact that, well, it doesn't really stuck up to me as much. So even then, hopefully by the time on the Switch version came out, I'll give that game a second chance, and then hopefully I will enjoy more than the forms of how it does it on the Wii version. Well, I haven't owned the Wii version just because the actual price for it is still pretty much expensive in terms of the actual, the retail purchase of that specific stuff, unless if you're able to download that onto the Wii U. And, well, as long as you can able to take on the go on the new 3DS, despite it was actually just some sort of like a port to the Wii version, apart from the fact that it's only exclusive to the new 3DS hardware because of the actual C-stick knob. So, yeah, you get the idea. So, yeah, pretty optimistic about the forms of Streets of Rage 4, basically, but even then, though, that's, obviously, it'll about to come out in 2020 next year, so even then, And it's a good thing too, because I've already got myself Streets of Rage 1 and 2 and 3 are usually parts of the forms of the Sega Mega Drive Ultimate Collection compilation. So it would be a good idea if I could able to get my chance to get my hands on, with Streets of Rage 4. So even then, it was about time I can able to actually jump into those 3 games before I jump onto the 4th installment or something. So yeah, sounds about right. And the next game they actually did announce is Bake and Switch, which is basically it's like some sort of like a cooking game or something like that, where you can able to actually just well, I don't know exactly what the entire gameplay is all about, to be honest with you guys, because I know I still really can't stress enough about the fact that I gotta say this again, that I don't usually look upon that much in terms of indie stuff, I have to be honest. Just because, it's not my cup of tea or anything like that when it comes to that. I know some people seem to enjoy this kinds of stuff though, but for me, I'm just gonna have to bypass it completely. I'm probably not gonna watch those ever again until whenever they decide to able to announce another set of indie showcases and all that stuff. I understand that because of the actual success for Nintendo Switch these days, but it's just that I just felt it's a bit too much for this year to me though, because well, I understand they're trying to do something new to the table and stuff like that, but it's just that it's not my kind of thing, and I'm probably not going to spend my money for able to actually just purchasing this kinds of stuff. The only time that, back in junior forms of in April and stuff like that, the only ND purchase I actually did manage to purchase of, and that was of course Cuphead, which that was the game I was mostly familiar with, because that usually becomes originally part of the Microsoft exclusive games, specifically the Xbox One and PC. So I really can't guarantee that they're probably not going to do the PS4 release of that specific game, because obviously because of how the fact that Microsoft and Sony doesn't team up or something. So I think that seems the case at this point, but then again though, no! I was a little bit too, that was a bit too early to able to actually notice the actual depth of it, or in this case, I was so close to able to get that balloon over there. Oh jeez. It might be a little bit too higher up, I have to say, for this matter though. But let's try a different balloon, so even then we could hopefully rank up some more coins here and there, so yeah, there's not much else to say. And another game they actually did announce for Indie World, and that's kind of a surprising one actually, because it kind of does the same thing for how it does it in the State of Play Direct, where basically it just says like Dreams as the actual game, but on the Nintendo Switch equivalent, it's a Super Mash, where basically we get ourselves the actual combinations of different of those gaming genres, like for instance RPGs and platforming and all sorts of stuff. And I was actually pretty curious to see how that turns out, but then again, I'm not gonna purchase it at day one, just because I'm usually gonna save it up until, hopefully trying to pre-order the Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC Remind, and especially noticeable with Mega Man 0/ZX Legacy Collection on the PlayStation 4. So hopefully I can able to complete myself the actual entire collection of Mega Man games basically. Well, as far as I've noticed about something is that the only collections that we do need left now is of course the actual Mega Man Legends collections, because well, obviously we haven't got the single Mega Man Legends collection, the Mega Man Legends game ever since Journey Forms of 2001, because I think the previous one they've ever done is of course Mega Man Legends 2. But unfortunately though, well, usually they were going to be able to bring out the third entry in the series to the Nintendo 3DS, but ultimately that game has got cancelled due to the forms of time constraints or something. But I digress. So anyways, let's go ahead and burn ourselves, and also just trying to grab the balloon at the same time. So, how's that for that? Although there's also another alternative way you can able to get that balloon, but I'll show that off and during later on though. So for now, let's pick a different balloon, shall we? As it seems to be more accurate though, we're actually doing this a pretty easy time on this one actually, because well, apart from the fact that it might be still pretty big as it is, but ultimately though, I feel like I have an easier time on this particular kingdom so far. So yeah, how's that for that too? So anyways, with the forms of Super Mash, basically that particular game will about to come out in May 2020 specifically, but don't know what exactly that day was going to be. But even then, we'll find out in Journey Forms of next year. So, and another game they actually did announce is the TAOLOS, the Principal or something like that. And then later on, though, it actually later released today. Well, just recently released. Well, again, I want to stress that enough again. I'm going to say that again anyway, though. I'm not exactly a huge ND games enthusiastic about this because, well, I'm entirely different to you guys out there because I know a lot of people seem to really enjoy these kinds of stuff, but not for me though anyway. But then again, the next game they actually did announce is for ND World is Sail Forth, and that game is basically you can able to deal well with the actual boat and everything like that. You know, kind of like how it did in one of those boat sections during the forms of, well, specifically the Kingdom Hearts 3, the Caribbean world, based off from Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And it seems okay, but then again, it's just not my preference when it comes to that specific solutions here. So, and that particular game will, you know, later on release during 2020. So, again, seems promising enough, but then again, it's not my kind of thing. So, and another game they actually did announce with is the .what list, which again I do apologize for the actual pronunciation errors. So I just want to classify that. So, and also there's also another game which is actually, to be honest with you, there's not much else I can talk about this because apart from the fact that, well, I said this before already, that I wasn't seemed interested in that specific stuff this. Oh yeah, the next game they actually did announce in ND World for recently, and that is Murderer by Numbers, which is kind of a weird title of the game, and that particular game will about to be released in early 2020, so God knows of what month is it going to be at, but even I know that again, we'll find out during the future. So, and there's something that the Odd World fans out there were able to expect it by this point, is that the Odd World's Struggler's Wrath HD, you know, with the forms of the Odd World series that you're most likely familiar with, that particular game has finally got itself the HD release during the forms of the Nintendo Switch, and I think it's gonna come out in the January 2020, which is roughly the same month as the forms of how it does it in Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind DLC. So yeah, it's pretty swell. But then again though, as much as the forms of some people seem to think about the Oddworld fans out there, well, I'm usually pretty interested with the forms of the PlayStation games, but even then though, I just don't think it's that interesting. Like, even then though, I'm just, like, I don't know, I'm just a little bit too convincing for myself from this point and onwards, but hopefully during the forms of tomorrow's video or something like that, then I'll mention some of the more exciting news, like to be more specifically for the Game Awards and all that stuff, so God knows what the predictions are going to be, but even then we'll have to wait and see what happens there, so, and it looks like we've almost reached up to the forms of the maximum amount of coins count, so even then, kudos to that, because even then though, that this is actually a really easy kingdom when it comes to finding more balloons and all that stuff, so I do appreciate about that specific stuff actually, so anyway, another game they actually did announce is kind of a weird game actually, which appears to be Skatebird, which usually, it's kind of like Tony Hawk per se, but the biggest difference is the fact that you're going to be taking control of the bird that usually controls all the forms of the skateboard. You know, kind of like that one particular scene at the end of Rio, where basically Blue needs to find Jewel while Jewel's being kidnapped by Nigel. And then basically, well, spoiler warning for those who have not seen the film yet, but I've seen this film quite a few times ever since in October 2011. Jeez, I can't believe that particular film. Well, when it gets to 2021, it will be 10 years old by now. Well, not until just yet though, because even then we still have not made it to, well, 2021 yet, because, you know, we're slowly approaching towards the end of the entirety of 2010's era still, but then again, it's just a little bit of a convenience that is, so yeah, that sounds about right. And for the actual release date for Skatebird, sorry for a little bit of a belching for this point folks, that particular game will be releasing until late 2020, so God knows what the actual date is going to be at, but then again, Labyrinth is another game that actually did manage to announce it, so not much commented on here. And plus, it's going to be on 2020 to be exact. And also another game they actually announced is Boyfriend Dungeon, which again also come out in 2020, so even then there's not much else commented on that. So, and also there's Dream Scraper, which I think is going to be coming out in early 2020, which then again no commented on here. And also there is the Survivalists, which usually has been made by the same developer as the Worm series, which is kind of cool, but again, not my interest, sadly, because of how the fact that I don't normally purchase that much in terms of ND stuff, to be honest with you. And this is also going to come out during the forms of at some point in 2020. And final game they're actually going to be announced in with the forms of the ND world, and that appears to be the sequel to the forms of, you know, the game called Axion Forge. Well, that game is now getting itself a sequel, which appears to be Axion Voyage 2. Which, relatively speaking, it might actually play the exactly the same thing as how it does in the original game, but God knows what usually just managed to add within. So, and I think that particular sequel will about to be coming out at some point in autumn 2020, so it's roughly going to be next year. So, even then there's not much commented on there. I'm sorry, this whole entire thing about the forms of the ND world is just a little bit nitpicking. I hate nitpicking sometimes, because I understand because most people seem to really enjoy these kinds of stuff, but then again, I said this before already, but I'm just not into these kinds of stuff like this. Sadly though, because, well, I do appreciate about this specific stuff, but this is down to in my opinion. I know some people seem to able to, you know, give me a lot of, like, criticism for me though, because, well, I just don't simply able to actually see the point about the fact that where's the forms of, well, the new announcements of Nintendo related, like the 5th Smash Bros. Ultimate DLC fighter, or even in this case, what's something new is about to come in 2020, but, whatever. We'll just, end this video off anyway, because I just really can't stress enough about the fact that, well, it has too much emphasis on that specific stuff for this year, though, but I'm really expecting, I don't really know if what's gonna come in 2020 specifically, but then again, we'll find out in during forms of that specific year, so... Anyway, so Luncheon Kingdom has been done when it comes to Luigi's Bloom World, and yeah, we did manage to reach up to 9,999 coins, but since we did manage to purchase 10 more of those Power Moons, and also same applies for the new costume that we can able to try on. That appears to be the Zombie Mario costume, which I know is a bit redundant for this point right now, just because you know how Halloween is basically finished. So I thought I might as well able to show that off, because it looks kind of interesting, because we got ourselves the axe on top of Mario's head, and also we become like zombie-like. And also, you know these little pimples? Well, they don't show up here, so that seems very cool. So, anyways, but we'll have to see that in during forms of tomorrow's video, sadly, because even then, join me next time on Let's Play Super Mario Odyssey is the fact that we are doing with Luigi's Bloom World in Bowser's Kingdom. So see you guys tomorrow for that. Later, fellas. Ooh.